Because it's like, it's a whole journey. I always say that. My journey. No, it's a journal. Journal. Okay.
I see your growth, it's amazing. Always evolving on a daily. She got a smile that's contagious. Got hella joy, don't let them take it.
Welcome back to the Real Joy Podcast. Today's episode, so if you watch my Real Talk, you already know what we're here for today. But today's episode is going to be on grief. This is, like I said in the Real Talk, going to be a challenge for me. So just bear with me. It's a vulnerable, real conversation. So I'm just going to jump right into it. When looking at my grief journey, I was watching a documentary, Megan Thee Stallion. I don't know if you all saw that documentary. I really recommend you watching it. It is so good, not even from looking at it at a grief standpoint, but just in general, like knowing her as an artist and knowing the story behind the artist. I really loved it. But as we all know, Meg also lost her mother at the age of, I think she was in her early 20s as well. And I resonated so much with her story because not only did she lose her mom, but she lost her dad at a younger age too. She lost her dad in high school. And I never mentioned my father on the podcast, but I also lost my dad at an early age as well. So that tied into her story as well. So that stood out to me too. But Meg, when you watch her documentary, it starts out and she's about to graduate from college, which is like a big moment for her. She's about to cross the stage. And everyone around her is so excited. Like they're pumping her up. She's getting her hair and makeup done and she looks beautiful. And she gets her degree and she's like all excited. And she comes back and the reality of the situation still exists. But everyone around her is so excited. And you could kind of see that she's like excited to be in that moment, but something is missing. And that's how she started to talk about her mom. And that stood out to me because I feel like that is my exact feeling in life. Like I'll be in a moment, I'll be excited. And then it's just like this constant reminder of like the one person that I would want to share this moment with and like where I'm at right now, they're not there. Like you aren't able to share that moment with them. So that really stood out to me when I was watching her documentary. And when she talks about her mother's relationship, it's just so powerful because at one point she was like, my mom was just not my mom. Like that was my best friend. Like that's your compass in life, you know? And when she talks about losing that, you're talking about someone who's in a public eye, who has to show up daily. Like we see Megan Thee Stallion, you know, we're like, where's the music? Where's this? And she felt like she had to keep going. She had to keep going. But at some point in time, that grief, you just feel like one day you wake up and you can't fake it anymore. You can't smile anymore. You can't just show up anymore. And I think just seeing her in that moment and seeing her for that person, also I related to her because I think at a certain point in life, you just have to be like, it's okay to not be okay. And you have to be honest about not being okay. And I would say for her, our grief process was a little different because she didn't really have a time to really process it. Her mom just went into the hospital and then she was sick. It was like a really fast process. But for me, my mom was sick. She had cancer. And I remember at one point they had only given her, I don't remember if it was 2 days or 2 weeks to live, but it was a very sudden timeline. And we didn't know. I think that was like at the beginning of when we found out that she had cancer. And she ended up living longer than that. I think when they gave her that final notice, she lived maybe even a year after that. But I think for me personally, my grieving process started when someone told me that I was going to lose my mom in 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever it was. And I think that for the people around me, my grieving process looked different. It was moments of anger. It was moments of misunderstanding. And I just feel like right at the time when my mom passed, I had already been through this whole emotion of anger. So let me talk about where that anger came from. So my mom got married when I was in college. She had got married. I talked about it on my Real Talk. So I think for this episode, it's going to help if you guys go back and listen to my first Real Talk. I kind of talk about the dynamic of my stepdad and kind of how I feel, how that played a part in things. So I'm going to touch on it now, but I go into depth more in that video. So I would suggest you go back and watch it, the first Real Talk that I ever did. But me and my stepfather, he had this protection over my mom, but I think he often protected her from things she didn't need protection from. And what she actually needed protection from was himself. But he was very protective over her, which actually was control. And he kept her family away from her. And if you know anything about my mom, there was like 3 things that brought her life: church, me as her daughter, and family in general. Like those 3 things is what kept her aligned. Like my mom cooked Sunday dinner every Sunday for my family. Like it was Thanksgiving every Sunday, not because she felt obligated. That's what brought her joy. That's what brought her happiness. So when she got married, her husband moved her away from a street that my whole family lived on. It was like, I believe there was 4 houses on that street that my family shared, and we did everything together. When she got married, he changed the dynamic completely of the family, isolated her, took her to another part of town. It was just them. He didn't like people coming over. We could no longer just stop by. My mom was like, had this open door policy. So if you was hungry, you could come in and eat. If you needed a place, like she was just that type of person for the family. So when she got married, the dynamics changed with everyone around her, everyone, and including me, her only child. And I think that when you talk about grief and you're talking about someone who was raised by a single mom, I remember I had a family member, actually my grandma, she told someone that she believes that I feel like my mom's death was just about me. And it's like, no, but yes. Like no one is affected the way that I am affected because I'm losing my mom. Like my grandmom has other children. You have other daughters. Like you're gonna, but like her child, like it's just a little different. So I feel like, in going back to what I'm saying, during that process of her passing away and her getting weaker and having those last days, I wasn't able to spend that time with my mom the way I would have liked to because her husband was too busy worrying about financial things that was going to happen after. So if he kept my mom away from me, we wouldn't have these conversations of what's going to happen after and where money is going to be allocated to. We weren't able to have those moments. And I think that was very strategic in keeping me away and keeping the reality away from my mom that she was going to leave me in this world by myself. And just to give you an example of what I'm saying, like her husband drove a 1996 Crown Vic. 2 weeks after my mom passed, he got a brand new 2019 Chevy truck. So that's what I mean when things are strategically placed to have an outcome that benefited one person and to kind of alienate and leave the other person to the side. But I say that to say during this process, before my mom even passed away, I had so much anger built up inside of me that I don't think I was understood properly. And I think the way that I was acting out, because I felt like nobody was advocating for me, that everybody kind of saw the effect of what was happening, but no one, like people would talk about it like, why is he doing this to you? Why is he doing that? But nobody would like, and I'm thinking of adults at the time, because yes, I'm 20, but I'm thinking about 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds, my aunts, people that I grew up with. Nobody was kind of coming to like and saying like to my defense almost and saying, why is this being done? I don't understand why this is being done to her. And I think over time, that anger just kept building up. So at the time of grief, when I actually lost my mom and when the death actually took place, I wasn't overwhelmed with this sadness because I was already going through that process. I already had to live without my mom while she was still here because I was being alienated and I was being pushed away from her. So I think my grieving process is a little different. And even at the funeral, I remember I was sitting there and it was just me and my stepdad on the front row. So I hadn't talked to him. We've been like at odds. He had called the police on me at one point because I just showed up to my mom's house because I'm like, you're not gonna keep me from my mom. And he called the police on me. So like, just giving you a background to like our relationship. And we're both sitting on the front row at my mom's funeral, and she's just like in the casket, and we're just sitting there. And I think that on the outside looking in, I looked like the bad daughter because I wasn't around everyone, and I started to like alienate myself because I felt so alone already and misunderstood. So when we were at the funeral, they did a standing ovation for my mom's husband for being such a great husband, being so supportive through this process and taking care of her. And I remember just sitting there just like, wow. Like the irony of this moment, the person who I feel took her lifeline away from her. And if people really understood the control and what was being done, and the irony that you guys are clapping for this man and saying that he is the best husband ever, I believe that's what really sparked my anger. And I remember telling someone, my cousin that I was really close with at the time, she wasn't able to come to the funeral. And I think that that was like a good thing almost, because I told her, like, when we bury my mom and when it's all said and done and her body goes down, I'm going to turn to that man and I'm going to, I think I said like punch him in the face or something. And I know she would have been the person to like egg me on and to make sure that happened, because that's the level of anger I was at. And I feel like everything was out of my control. And I was just trying to hold this respect for my mom. But I think that's another part of my grief. I felt like after my mom passed, I didn't have anybody to hold me to a standard. And I was just like, now I'm going to display this anger in this way. I'm going to act out in this way because I don't have this person to kind of guide me anymore. I don't have this person to hold me accountable. Because if you think about your parent, that's kind of what they do. They are the ones that raised you. They know what you're supposed to be doing in life. And so when I lost that, I felt like all bets are off for everybody. Like, I'm going to be the person that you guys have painted me out to be. And that turned me into what grief turned me into in 2018 to 2019, I say, was a person that I never knew I could be. And I'm not proud of that person looking back, because I was just so, like, even when I think about relationships and I never had a quote unquote hoe phase in life, but I feel like, go back to Kalani's dad, we had this whole college relationship. That was after that. And I remember what happened the night that my mom passed. My ex came. So all this stuff compiled. So now I'm single. I haven't been single in a while. I've always had these real relationships with people, these like meaningful, lifelong, like supposed to be my husband relationships. I don't have that anymore. I lost my mom. It turned me into a person that was like a rebel, or like I could do what I want because who gonna check me? Like, so I remember like because I was grieving, I wasn't eating. So I was like drinking and smoking all the time. So I lost weight in like 2 weeks. This is in my 20s now. So I dropped weight. This was the smallest I had ever been. I literally started to become so hypersexual. Like, I remember just like having this like sexual, like, but when I think back to it, I was looking for some type of love or some type of attention. And I did not even recognize myself at one point. Like, I remember just doing stuff just to do it and looking for some type of, like I said, attention, affection. So I think like when grief isn't properly, when you don't properly sit down and deal with the root of things, I found it just leading into things that just wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't anything. I was around people that I didn't need to be around, just anybody who was willing to accept me. So I have friends that weren't really my friends. They're probably using me, probably just having me around for the money or different things like that. So My grieving process just was really hard at first because I think when you talk about grief, right, like you think, okay, I'm going to be with my family. My family's going to get me through this, my support system. But my grieving process was with everyone but my family. And I think, like I said, it was due to just like, I had lost trust in my family. And I found myself having to make my own support system with people who weren't in my family. And it was hard because at the time I was living, like I said, on the street with my family. So I had like an aunt over here, and an aunt next door to me. But it often at times felt like during the process, everyone was like wanting to be around me, because like I said, they thought I had came into all this money when they realized that what I said was actually happening. I didn't get anything after my mom passed other than like $5,000, I would say, which I owed people at the time because I wasn't working. I kept calling out for bereavement. So I still had to pay bills. So like when that money came to me, it was like nothing already. So I think that my family didn't understand that. I was mad that my mom had passed away. Like I said, this guy's pulling up in a new car. He gave all his grandkids all this money. He furnished his granddaughter's house off of my mom's. Like he was taking care of his family off of my mom passing away. And I remember his granddaughter was friends with someone that I knew. And she was like, oh yeah, my friend said to me that her grandfather bought all this furniture because some lady died. And I was like, she didn't even know that it was her grandfather's wife. Some lady died and she just got all this stuff and was given all these things. And it was just like, no, that lady was my mom and you guys are benefiting off of her passing away and you're being taken care of. But her daughter and her granddaughter is basically out here just assed out, basically, like with no one to take care of them, with no one. So like, as you guys can see, I'm still I think this is when we talk about healing. Healing is such a lifelong process because we're still human. And when things come up, it still affects you as if it just happened yesterday. No matter how far you come from that day, when those emotions come up and that rawness comes up, like it's okay you can say that you're healed, but it's okay to still have those emotions and to still have those feelings. So I think that grief is so important to talk about because, like I said, if it's not talked about, if you don't deal with the root of things, if you're not honest with yourself about where you are in that moment, it could be very detrimental to your character, to who you are as a person. And if you don't have the right people around you who are pouring into you, who are checking on you, who are really trying to understand where you are and help you through that, I think that's where grief can take a good turn or a bad turn, right? Like if you have the proper support system, if people are understanding where you are. Like I remember one part when I was talking about, I went to a mental hospital, right? And I remember my cousin and my aunt came to the mental hospital and they literally like came there and I'm just sitting and whatever they had on me. And I remember sitting at the table and I was numb and I wasn't talking. And they just literally stared at me like they went to the zoo to look at an animal behind the glass. Like I remember they were just like looking at me in like this daze. And they didn't give any words of encouragement. They didn't say like, what's going on in here? Like there was nothing, like no one at that time ever took into consideration, I feel like this girl just lost her mom. As simple as that sounds. I think everybody was worrying about, oh, I just lost my cousin. Oh, I just lost my sister. Oh, I just lost this person. But like nobody like thought about this 25-year-old girl just lost her mom. And what does that do for her world? What is that going to look like for her? Who's going to teach her these things that she's still trying to understand as a woman? Who's going to give her that nurturing attitude towards her? Who's going to tell her at 20 years old, you're not going to have everything figured out? Who's going to continue to cultivate that person that she's trying to be? Nobody, I feel like in that moment in my family took that role, took that responsibility. No one did that for me. And it forced me to find people like Jamie, to find people outside of my family, because nobody took that time to really understand me in that moment. It was so easy to write me off because she's angry. Hell yeah, I'm angry. You would be angry if these things were happening to you too. But it almost made it easy. Like, oh, she's angry, so we're just gonna leave her to be angry. Oh, she has attitude, so leave her over there. She wants to have attitude, she's gonna have to understand what that attitude does for her. This is not just about her. We lost this person too. No, because there's people, think to my aunt, who is, I believe, 60 years old. She lives with my grandma still to this day. They do everything together. They go on vacation together. They go grocery shopping together, everything. And you're telling me right now, as a 60-year-old woman, if you would lose your mom at that big age, you would not know, but you have had your mom to help you raise your kids. You've had your mom at your wedding. You've had your mom at all these things. And you're talking about a 25-year-old. And it was almost like they were holding me to the standards of them as an adult. Like, okay, well, just deal with it. You've lost your mom. Like, oh, okay, like, you'll be okay. And it's like, no, I absolutely won't be okay. I'm a new mom. And me saying all these things now, I realized I would just internalize everything, and it turned into anger, and it turned into anger. And I was just so angry at the fact that I would even have to say these things to people. Like, why do I have to explain this to you? So I think in the next part, I really want to share with you guys my family dynamic and really talk about the support system in that time, and kind of shed light more on my family dynamics with people and where I'm at today with my family. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I know you guys felt the emotion, but stay tuned to part 2, and I'm going to continue and telling you about my family and everything. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Real Joy podcast. I hope today's conversation brought you closer to finding your own joy and left you feeling inspired. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you like what you heard, share it with your circle. It might be just the thing they need. Let's keep growing, glowing, and finding joy together. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember to keep it relaxed, relatable, and real. See you soon.
I can see you making moves. The chosen one, we steady choosing you. She dope as hell, but she a Libra too.